Welcome to part 2 of Planning to Address Unfinished Math Learning, an asynchronous module which is part of the Louisiana Department of Education's Acceleration in Mathematics Professional Learning Series. If you have not already done so, please pause the module, grab a pen or pencil and something to jot notes on, and take a moment to download the resources that accompany this session. For this particular module, it would be beneficial to print the math planning guide and the student work samples. You may be viewing this module for a variety of reasons, either as an instructional leader to build your own knowledge around how to support teachers, as a leader utilizing the module to facilitate a PLC, or as a teacher or group of teachers who are interested in growing professionally. Whatever your role or setting, the ultimate goal of the modules in this series is to provide you with tools and support as you work to make the vision of LDOE's Accelerate Initiative a reality. And that is that all students can achieve high expectations regardless of their background, family, income, or zip code. Before we jump into the content of this session, let's take a moment to establish some community agreements. Look around you. Wherever you are, that is fine. If you're sitting at a school desk, on a lounger at home, or sitting by the pool, that is the joy of these modules. You can come as you are right now in this moment. All that we ask is that for this hour or so, that you focus on the learning and try to mute the life around you. Learning doesn't end after a 1-hour video. It takes place over time. So take what you learned today and use it at your school. Invite others to engage in a discussion over the material. Go back and watch this module or the others again once you have internalized it, and you will see something new. Continue the learning since learning is iterative. And finally, embrace the pause. There will be times during this video that you need to reflect on something or to try something before moving on. That is why the pause button was created. You are welcome to pause and re-watch this module as many times as you need while you begin your journey of learning with us. So embrace that reflection time. Let's discuss what we will be accomplishing in this module. Through the asynchronous learning, you will explore how the math planning guide can support teachers in engaging in student work analysis to accelerate students towards on-grade level content in the mathematics classroom. Here we have the LDOE acceleration cycle. You will remember this from part 1. In part 2, as we focus on analyzing student work, we are really going to be monitoring student progress and diagnosing unfinished learning so that we can plan for how to deliver just-in-time support. The idea of providing students with just-in-time support can be daunting to many teachers, which is why the math planning guide can be such an extremely beneficial tool for teachers to use in planning sessions. Not only does it support you in establishing a common foundational understanding of the standards and identify specific spots to formatively assess students, it also offers one structure for interpreting and planning to act on that evidence by unpacking student understanding in a structure called a 3-stack protocol. Taking time to analyze student work has multiple benefits. These include gaining a more comprehensive understanding of what students know and are able to do over time. Student work helps teachers get inside students' heads and understand what students are thinking and how their thinking is developing over time. Embedding professional development in teachers' daily practices to improve student achievement. When teachers participate in ongoing conversations about teaching and learning, they engage in the practice of reflective thinking about their beliefs, assumptions, and practices. Collegial feedback and critical analysis of student work in a safe and structured format creates a culture that supports continuous learning. Another benefit is building a sense of community. Looking collaboratively at student work and participating in collective problem solving move teachers away from the isolating concept of my students and toward the community concept of our students. These practices develop a culture of shared problem solving and demonstrate the power of focusing multiple perspectives on a single issue. Fostering a culture that collaboratively assesses the quality and rigor of teacher work. Collegial feedback and discussion enables teachers to critically analyze whether their lessons or units ask students to construct knowledge, develop mathematical habits of mind, and make connections between the school and the real world. Lastly, it helps to develop a shared public criteria to assess student work. As teachers look at student and teacher work, they develop a shared language for assessing student work and a common understanding of what quality student work looks like. When these criteria are made public and shared with students, the quality of the work continues to improve. To avoid some potential roadblocks when analyzing student work in PLCs, we are going to look at some mindsets and ground rules that are aligned with productive beliefs about assessment. Take a moment to read the shifts listed on the side. Feel free to pause now if you need more time to review them. When these ideas are kept at the forefront of our conversations, especially when discussing implications for instruction, it increases our collective efficacy and the likelihood that our collaboration will lead to improved learning for all students, not just for some. With these ideas in mind, I'd like you to consider the following ground rules to hone in on implications for our instruction together as a team. Just as we have norms for our collaborative learning and planning sessions, establishing norms or ground rules for student work analysis is an important step in overcoming barriers. Critical and collegial listening skills are important to the success of this process, and these ground rules enable us to stay focused on the task at hand, and they increase the likelihood of meaningful, fact-based conversations. First of all, focus on the evidence, not on what you think the students know. This is critical in order to reveal an accurate picture of student understanding and how instruction is supporting or impeding learning. Be aware of personal bias. This process is about focusing on a grade level or course or team or department, not on individuals. Be in the spirit of learning and environment. This process is about supporting an environment in which a group can safely share ideas and process information collectively through dialogue. Maintain a professional atmosphere. It is important for participants to honor the group norms that promote an environment where everyone learns and contributes to the collective understanding. The protocol we're going to be looking at is not about individual students, but it's about creating a safe environment to collaboratively make aligned instructional decisions. The Unpack Student Understanding portion of the planning guide, which is the last part, includes a protocol for analyzing student work that helps ensure consistency and fidelity across the system. The 3-stack protocol is a simple process in which team members analyze student work to formatively assess the nature and extent of student understanding and to determine the implications for instructional practice and effectiveness. This protocol is designed for near future instructional adjustments, such as exit tickets. Near future means that you have time to actually analyze the work outside of the classroom, ideally in a professional learning community setting. We are addressing these near future assessments in this module because through building up expertise in these collegial conversations and PLCs, teachers are better able to make those immediate in the moment instructional adjustments. Just like we saw that there was some pre-work that was necessary for the team to do in preparation for efficient and effective planning in part 1, there is also some preparation that needs to be done by teachers who are bringing student samples to the collaborative student work analysis. Teachers should select a representative sampling of student work. So no more than 5 student work samples that really give a good picture of what you see happening in the classroom across the board. Remove all student names and establish an alternate convention for referring to the samples. For example, you could number them or use letters. And then have copies of each sample ready for each team member to review in the PLC. In part 1, we had the opportunity to observe a 5th grade team as they utilized the planning guide to engage in collaborative conversations around establishing a common foundational understanding of the standards and then bridging that understanding to planning for an individual lesson. In this module, you will now have the opportunity to explore the student work analysis protocol by using student work samples from the exit ticket that team decided on when they planned the lesson together. The first step in the 3-stack protocol is to review the lesson level performance expectations in order to maintain a consistency in rating. Let's watch the 5th grade team set the stage for their collaborative student work analysis. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about student work. So just before we jump in, I just want to remind you we have our norms that we always follow in our planning and PLC sessions, but we also have been, we established some ground rules for looking at student work because this is like a specific type of planning. And I just want to remind you of what those are. They're in your planning guide document, but also we've got them up there on our anchor chart. that we're really going to try and focus on the evidence. So even though you may have seen kids do things in your lesson or in your classroom that makes you think that they can accomplish the expectations, if we don't see it in the student work, we aren't counting it as evidence. We're only having discussions about what we actually see in front of us, okay? We're not trying to extrapolate or guess. Be aware of personal bias. That kind of goes hand in hand with that evidence. If you recognize, we know we take the names off of these and just number them. If you recognize a student's handwriting or the way they explain things or a strategy they tend to lean towards, try and just check yourself of those biases and just focus on what's evident in the student work again. Be in the spirit of dialogue. We want to engage in conversation here, right? There's probably going to be some disagreements at first, but like that's what this is about, is us sharing and kind of coming to an alignment and identifying next steps. And then maintaining a professional atmosphere, which I know we're not going to have any problem with, but sometimes you feel personal when it's, your students, but these are all our students. So we want to maintain that professional atmosphere. So with that being said, the last lesson that we met and talked about, we did touch on some performance expectations from that lesson. And I tried to go through our discussion and kind of capture them and put them up there on our anchor chart for our reference. But basically, all the discussions that we had were focused on the fact that this lesson was really honing in on supporting students as they move from those visual representations towards a more abstract way of getting that like unit or common denominator so that they can add or subtract fractions. So for those performance expectations, we expected students to be able to start making that movement, right? Not necessarily being masters of the abstract, but making the transition. One thing that you guys brought up that we needed to make sure is that they should be showing they should know that they need like units, right? That was one of the expectations we had out of that lesson. Then applying some sort of strategy to find the like units and making that connection between the visual and the abstract. And the reason we talked so much about that, if you remember, is because we know that fourth grade maybe jumped to the abstract too quickly. So we're still trying to see if our students, we want to make sure they have the conceptual understanding, because we may have some that can do the abstract efficiently, but without an understanding of what they're doing. So those are our performance expectations that we had out of the lesson. So what I'd like for you guys to do now, and we have, thank you guys so much for honoring your commitments and coming with copies of your sampling of your student exit tickets. So we each have a copy of those. Nobody put any students' names on them. We've got them numbered for our conversation purposes. And the first thing that we're going to do is go through and look through individually through the student work and sort it into our 3 stacks. Referring back to those performance expectations, stack 1 is where most of the dimensions are not met. Stack 2 is where most of the dimensions are met. And then stack 3 is where they are all clearly evident. So everything up there, no questions about it. It's all clearly evident there. Erica, you seem like you had a question or a thought.
I had it backwards.
Oh, okay. Now I'm going to give you guys some time to individually look through the sampling now that we have examples from all of us, and sort them into your stacks and make some notes so that we're going to come back together and have a discussion and try and come to a consensus on what stacks and then figure out what our next steps are going to be. The next step is to individually analyze and rate the student work samples by sorting them into 3 stacks. Stack 1, most of the target dimensions are not evident. Stack 2, most target dimensions are evident. And stack 3, all target dimensions are clearly evident. If you have not already done so, you'll want to make sure you have a copy of the student work samples that accompany this module and the Unpack Student Understanding section of the planning guide handy, because you're about to jump right in and engage in this part of the protocol. Now, pause the video to take some time to individually sort the student work samples into 3 stacks based on the team's lesson performance expectations shown on the slide. Go ahead and pause and do your individual sorting of those samples now. After individual analysis, it's time for the group to share and compare their individual findings and come to a consensus on a stack for each work sample. If you are in a PLC setting, pause now to take some time to share and compare and come to a consensus on your stacks. Now, let's watch as the 5th grade team comes to a consensus on their student work samples. So do you guys feel like you had enough time to go through and sort into the 3 stacks, at least in preparation enough to have a conversation so we can try to come to a consensus? Okay, so I'm just gonna open the floor for you guys to have a conversation about your stacks, and I'll be taking some notes, and I may ask for clarifying questions, for clarification as you're in your discussion. But however you guys want to start off, if you want to talk student by student or stack by stack, to kind of see if we can come to a consensus on how we place the student work.
Would somebody like to start with a stack and tell us which numbers you had, and then we can just see how we compare? Is that a good approach or workable? Mm-hmm.
Do we do stack 3?
Sure.
Okay. So I have student 1, student 2, student 3, and student 5 in my stack.
And Erica, those are the ones that, so because you say reverse.
Right, these are actually the ones that all target dimensions are clearly evident.
Okay.
You said 1, 3, 5.
1, 2, 3, 5.
I had student 1 and student 5.
So 5 is really the only one that we all have as category 3.
Okay.
Lisa and I are 1.
Mm-hmm.
Though Lisa, it sounds like you've questioned that.
The way that this student regroups the 2 8s
Right.
to come up with the whole,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was,
There's an
they're
understanding
showing,
there.
yes, they're
Yeah.
showing an understanding that 2 8s is a 4th,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're clear that this is, the combination of these 2 fractions of gallons of iced tea end up being more than a whole. And then the student seems to actually also think about it a different way, as there's a third 3/4 here, and there's another 3/4 there, and then there's another 8. So I wasn't sure what they were thinking there. But anyway, I just felt like that was one of the better attempts toward that criteria.
So I can tell you why I didn't have it in the group, but
Mhm.
now that I'm looking at it again, I think I would change my mind. So I originally saw this 1/4 here
Mm-hmm.
and that little arrow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was expecting to see 3/4 plus 1/4. And so
Mhm.
I was thinking their visual didn't match their algorithm or their, numerical
Mhm.
representation here.
Mhm.
So it's like, oh, there's a disconnect, so they're not connecting the things.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I'm
But
looking at
then,
it
yeah.
again, I'm
Yeah.
seeing there's this
Right.
where they
Mhm.
also are doing the 3/4.
Yeah.
So I just missed that.
They just didn't, and I missed it at first, and since it was the first one, and I hadn't looked at any of them, so then I was just like, I am taking forever on this.
Well, and that, you know
But,
what, Lisa, that's a good thing to keep in mind, that this is it's an analysis, and because it's, we're still early on in this process, we are going to be more analytical about it, but it's something for us we're going to become more efficient to quickly look for trends, right? I also think, to your point, because of where we're at in this standard and developing students' understanding, it is a little more difficult for us to pinpoint the things we identified as the lesson expectations in here, right? So it's good that we're having this conversation. So, Molly, you're saying that now, based on so we are in a consensus as far as student 1, student 5. We feel like those are examples.
Yeah.
You guys said you wanted to talk about 3.
So Molly, you had that one, I had it too.
Yeah.
Lisa?
Lisa, do you want to talk about maybe
Yeah.
why you didn't feel like, what you felt like that one was?
So, and also I find it curious that the student is actually like applying a subtractive approach to this, you know, like recognizing each brought less than a thing, and if they had brought a whole thing, they would have had 2 gallons, you know. So I like those things were interesting to me, but I just don't see the evidence is there.
Well, so I definitely think this shows the need for like units. Like that one I feel pretty confident they understand like units because they're
You
converting.
do? Because they're
Converting 1/4. They're converting the units of fourths to eighths.
I wonder,
You know.
looking at the fractions in the problem, where do you think they would have gotten that, somehow they got that estimate of 2 as being close to the answer? Right, that somehow they got 2 as something to work back from.
7/8.
And 3/4 are both close to full gallons.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but when you say like what's this 1 5/8 full?
Well, like how did they get to that, is what you're saying?
If they combine them into a jug,
Right.
into a thing.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's technically. I think that's like loose terminology,
Well, I think
but
it's,
I think the
it's
conceptual
really
understanding is
it's,
there.
I think the hard part of when we're looking at criteria is that you want that thing to be in evidence, and I just don't see that's in evidence. I see understanding,
Mm-hmm.
right? I see some use of like renaming a fraction, right, for a particular purpose.
They're not
or a
convincing
whole-
you.
But I'm just not convinced
Yeah.
that they are moving from a visual representation to doing it abstractly. I think that what's really important here is just the way that we're like digging in on this, right? And we're looking really closely at evidence, and each of us are making sort of different arguments for the student understanding.
Are you guys, what can we come to a consensus on? Like, it sounds like we're saying that this student does have a level of understanding of fractions and has found a way to make sense of this problem that's rooted in conceptual understanding.
I
But-
think that's true.
But are we now taking that towards the more abstract structure that was in this lesson, the way that we went through in the building, like the actual building of the concept part of the lesson? Do we see evidence of that here? I feel like that's where Lisa's at. Like, I see understanding here. I see this student is making sense of the problem, but struggling with, are they working towards an efficient abstract strategy to rename fractions and add them?
So there's lots of good stuff here. I just
Okay.
wouldn't call it.
You aren't all the way with clearly evident,
Yeah.
based on the amount of discussion that we've had. There's a lot of good stuff, but maybe not clearly evident. Okay.
And I'm swayed, I mean, I see where you're coming from, Lisa.
Mhm.
I really do. Molly identified 7
I did.
or 7.
I did.
7 as,
Oh, a 3.
A 3.
yeah, I gave that one a 2.
So I see a visual model.
Mm-hmm.
I see them a
Mm.
need for like
Mm-hmm.
units.
Mm-hmm.
I see them trying to represent it numerically, abstractly, right? So, and
Mhm.
even doing like I need to have 4 be like 2,
Mm-hmm.
or 4 like be like 8. So let me multiply it by 2.
Mm-hmm.
So then that means I need to multiply the top by 2, which gives me 6 8s. and then adding that in the way that we learned. They did have an adding issue, but who cares? And so yeah, to me this was visual to abstract.
I thought that the fact that they didn't get the addition was put them in the 2 category.
Well, it's another one of those like where if you hang on to the criteria really carefully,
Right.
it doesn't say that, so I didn't worry about it.
Does this student, based on the criteria and what they've shown here, does this student need additional support with any of that criteria up there?
No, they got it.
So stack 1 for me was student 4.
Yeah, I definitely had student 4 in step 1.
Me too.
Okay, so we can move them out of the way. They didn't have any like terms. I also had student 8 in step 1.
I can go 1 or 2 on 8 because I'm split, right? So I think, yes, they did the visual, right? And I think, yes, on criteria 3, which is apply a strategy for finding like units to add or subtract.
Which they found the common, which was 16, right?
Right, and then I felt like no on show understanding of the need for like units.
I wonder if this one, when we look, it sounds like you guys are saying that the next ones that we look at are you categorized as 2, right? So I wonder if this one will fall in the trend of these, or if this is an outlier as far as what we feel like the student needs.
Right.
Well, the last 2 feel very similar to me.
Okay.
So I feel like I can see a trend across these 2 for sure.
Which ones?
So 6 and 2.
6.
So they both did this like butterfly.
The butterfly, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Why do you think is that something that you guys showed them how to do during your lessons?
No.
I think it's something
Okay.
they brought.
Okay.
From I don't know where.
Well, maybe that's the strategy that 4th grade was comfortable with and felt like that was what was gonna help. I mean, it stuck with them somehow.
I mean, it shows that they know that they need like units.
Okay.
This is like totally somebody teaching them a 6th grade cross multiply and divide strategy. Like this is
A
some
trick.
kind of weirdness.
Yeah.
Right now, what I hear you guys saying is it kind of sounds like you have the same questions about the understanding of both of these, right? And you guys brought these as representative samples from your class, so this must be something that's happening more than just with these 2 students, right?
Yeah.
So why don't we get to talking about what we're going to do? The 4th step in the process is the most critical. This is when the team discusses the trends in the work samples, identifies instructional implications, and plans for next steps. Pause now to either individually or collaboratively engage in this last step. Now, let's observe how the 5th grade team continues to discuss trends and identify instructional implications. So thinking trend-wise, like we've got 3 stacks now, right? The 3s, a trend, right, was that the 3s all have, you guys didn't ask questions
Right.
about their visuals. You were
Right.
able to tell
Right.
based on what was here that they have an understanding of a visual and a numeric representation to go with that visual. Okay, so if we tried to come up with like a trend that we notice about what students can do, because I think that that's an interesting way to phrase it, right? Do we see a trend in these of what these students can do for the ones we're debating on whether they're 1 or 2, because that word most, right? Most are not. But do we see any trends on what they can do in these? Trying to take that asset-based approach so that we can build off of that when we're supporting them, right?
They can find like units.
Okay. These 2, you're talking about student 2 and student 6?
all of them.
Okay.
They do it in different ways.
Yep, okay.
But they all can find it. Two and six do it in the same way. The other two would do it in different ways.
Okay.
Well, and student 2 got the answer.
Mm-hmm. It's just that they don't have the visual
Right.
connection that we're looking for that helps us really feel confident that they
Mhm.
understand,
Exactly.
other than just kind of doing an algorithm.
What do you think, looking at these student 1/student 2, like what are your thoughts or implications about maybe, because remember, like we still have that day 2, right? We split up this lesson. So what are your thoughts about where we want to kick off? Like what are some implications for instruction based on what we're seeing here and where kids are at?
So from these two guys, right, I want to see.
When you say these two guys, which ones?
2 and 6.
2 and 6, okay.
I want to see that they know why they need these like units. What we can, when we said convince me, maybe they thought this would be convincing to show the multiplication. So maybe we can specify convince me using a model, just so that we know that they understand, since they didn't do that.
Okay.
And that's what we're really saying we're looking for here.
Would that be a solution for student 8 and student 3? Which again, that means we brought these because there must be other students who did similar things, right? So adding the picture, these students have pictures, right? They tried visual representations.
Well, just like we asked from these students to give us a picture as well, would we want this student to show us the equation? Like ask for both, because is that where we aren't sure that they converted their visual thinking to like the algorithm equation that we were trying to teach and making sure they understood? So asking for both of those things, just more directly instead of just saying convince me. So we are asking for exactly what we want from them.
Yeah, you could ask them to write an equation to represent the situation.
But is that how you would go into day 2? Like, is that how you would?
Or just maybe one of the problems, I don't know, yeah, maybe one of the earlier problems, so we can kind of formatively assess up front.
Obsess.
Formatively obsess. Assess up front if they can do that.
Because what we had them to do, right, was we gave them a story problem, Hannah and the friend, right? But then eventually we asked them to read, draw, and write an equation.
Mhm.
And so maybe that's what we needed here.
What are we saying our implications are? Like, what do we think our next steps are to start off the day 2? Or do you have any
Well-
thoughts on a strategy we could use to kick it off?
I'm thinking back to earlier when your student work analysis, or like bringing it in front of the students and having them think about the work that was done. And we can use this work or, like last year's work, like you mentioned before, and showing them one that is very algorithmic in some ways and doesn't have pictures, and others that have the pictures but less of the connection to the equation, and seeing their thinking and how they interpret those, and if they can draw connections between them, if they know how they relate to one another. I'm losing the actual ones now.
Yeah, so like this is my favorite, no.
Yeah.
Because there's so much going on this is student 3 with the visual, but there's no equation, you don't see people finding common denominators and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But, you know, there's a sophisticated thing that's represented here between this picture and the answer.
I love that strategy because it helps students see that we are acknowledging that it may not be everything that we're looking for, but there's good stuff that we love in here, and let's have a conversation about what we love about it, and then where are we going from here? Did you have any specific thoughts, Erica?
Yeah, there's definitely some students that I could work with in the tutorial where we may just need to go back to the concrete representations of fractions and connect it back to the pictorial.
Yeah, I agree. So then we'll go ahead and move forward with the second part of the lesson, and we'll talk about how that went when we come back together next time, and make sure that we're continuing on with supporting students, making sure they've got it, and just make sure, if you guys have any questions, reach out to me, and thank you guys so much for respecting our time.
Good stuff.
These reflection questions can help you as you process your learning from this module. How does the 3-stack protocol support teachers in making timely instructional decisions as they facilitate acceleration in their math classrooms? How does collaborative student work analysis promote high-quality math instruction for all students? And what are your next steps for implementing your learning from this module? Pause now and consider your responses to these reflection questions. If you are watching in a team or in a PLC, have a conversation to debrief on your thoughts. Throughout this module, it's no doubt that your wheels have been turning as you're thinking about some next steps to implement what you have learned. Here are some additional things to keep in mind. Share what you have learned today. It will be a lot easier to move forward if you have colleagues you can collaborate with. Keep in mind that this protocol is really about the collegial conversations and making sure everyone on the team is on the same page and is making instructional decisions that are best for students. Ask for help. Remember, you are not on an island. Reach out to instructional leaders at your site, your parish, or your district. And at the end of the module, I will share additional contact information if you want to learn more. Thank you for taking the time to reflect and for engaging in this asynchronous module. Please feel free to revisit this recording as often as you like and take back the information and resources from this session to your team, in addition to visiting the sites on the slide for additional information regarding the LDOE's Accelerate initiative and for those planning resources. Finally, have any questions, comments, want to learn more? Please reach out to STEM@la.gov with any questions or comments.